Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the VELOCYS PLC interim results for the 6-month ended 30th of June 2021 investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just click Q&A, scroll to the bottom, type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question received during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and will publish responses where appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard and will notify you by email once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. Before I hand you over to Henrik Wehrborn, CEO, and Andrew Morris, CFO, to present the interim results, we'd like to run a short video.
VELOCYS is a rare company that has a technology and a solution and an ability to deliver to our clients something that they need very urgently right now. So our clients are fuel producers. The challenge for fuel producers is to provide clean fuel which is no longer produced from fossil sources such as crude oil. That's why they come to VELOCYS. We have the technology that allows fuel producers to convert other feedstocks which are sustainable and not from fossil sources and produce the same kind of fuel, meeting the same standards and allowing their customers to continue to use their technology like before. So I'm talking about sustainable aviation fuel, for example. That can be produced from solid, sustainable feedstocks such as waste from agriculture, forestry, or urban activities such as municipal waste. That is not easy. You require a set of technologies in order to convert these feedstocks into fuel, but it can be done. And the central processing unit, the most crucial step on that conversion, is provided by VELOCYS FT technology, which we have perfected over 20 years of research, and that is commercially available now.
VELOCYS has developed an integrated process that unlocks hydrogen and carbon gases from sustainable waste feedstocks to produce liquid hydrocarbon fuels. At the heart of this process is VELOCYS's reactor and catalyst for the Fischer-Tropsch synthesis of hydrocarbons. VELOCYS was originally a spin-out company from the University of Oxford, where they had developed a way to make the FT process much more efficient with the use of catalysts. This required a new sort of reactor that could work at the higher rate. Such a reactor, using fine microchannels, was being developed by another spin-out company in the United States, and the two companies were merged under the name VELOCYS. From an early stage, this new technology has been well protected by patents.
VELOCYS has a robust patent portfolio with around 128 patents in 41 families. IP is one of our main assets as a company, and it's something that investors value tremendously for VELOCYS. The IP covers not only the technology that we've produced in terms of the catalysts and the reactors, but also some of the technology, the integrated technology package, end-to-end of the large projects that are going to be built in the future by our customers.
What's important here, I'm not talking about something that is research and development stage. I'm talking about a technology that has been demonstrated originally in lab, then in pilot, and then commercial scale demonstration. So we're ready for large scale commercial deployment right now.
A commercial scale demonstration in America used gas from landfill to produce a product that met renewable fuel standards. The VELOCYS reactors at the plant ran for over 6,000 hours, providing valuable data and knowledge that has been fed into subsequent projects.
We already have a couple of clients in America and in Japan who are using our technology and deploying it in facilities that they are constructing right now. And we are helping to accelerate the adoption of our technology in various ways with the different partners.
Sustainable aviation fuel produced from wood chips using VELOCYS reactors has already been used in a commercial flight in Japan, and a full commercial scale refinery is now planned. Sustainable fuels can be made from a variety of feedstocks, and another project in Japan will exploit captured or atmospheric CO2 to create an e-fuel. Sustainable fuels produced with VELOCYS FT technology can be blended with existing aviation fuel and used without any modification to aircraft engines and refuelling infrastructure. Other large-scale projects are at advanced planning stage. In the UK at Immingham, the Altalto site being developed with British Airways will use municipal waste. Here in Mississippi in the United States, the biofuels plant will use forestry waste as a feedstock. VELOCYS' technology can access these feedstocks in a flexible and sustainable way.
The VELOCYS proprietary technology is uniquely suited for producing fuel from solid feedstocks close to where the feedstock already is and close to where it's needed. So that means that the input and output is more sustainable because we have shorter distances, both for transport of the feedstock as well as transport of the finished product.
A recent report by the World Economic Forum confirmed that waste from agriculture, forestry and municipal sources is available in abundance to meet the demand for sustainable aviation fuels. VELOCYS is well placed to turn this demand into revenue.
For VELOCYS, we earn money from licensing technology, from performing engineering work for our customers, and then ultimately selling reactors and catalysts to them. And those are the real areas that we generate revenue. And the thing that's particularly interesting for investors is the fact that at the financial close of a project, that's when we earn a significant sum of money for building reactors, completing most of the license fee and final engineering payments. Then once the plant gets into operation, the company then earns from recurring revenues on a regular basis. So we replace the catalyst in each reactor every 2 years. So that's recurring revenue for the life of the plant. Then on top of that, VELOCYS obtains a decarbonisation royalty, which is a royalty that's charged to the project based on the amount of fuel that they produced. So it's a very small percentage of the fuel revenue that should ensure that VELOCYS has a recurring revenue and an interest in the plant to maintain its operability.
It is increasingly being recognised by government and industry that, for aviation, using sustainable fuels within existing engines is the only feasible way to achieve net zero carbon emissions within the required timeframe, as alternative technologies such as electrification or hydrogen fuel are likely to be decades away from commercial readiness. And using sustainable aviation fuel in existing aircraft brings additional benefits for air quality because, compared with conventional fossil fuels, sustainable fuels produced using the VELOCYS FT process reduce emissions of soot by 90% and of sulfur dioxides by up to 100%. The integrated production process can also use carbon capture and storage. Carbon dioxide can be captured and placed deep underground, effectively reducing the net amount of CO2 in the atmosphere and producing a fuel with negative carbon intensity. The place for sustainable fuels on the route to net zero is now established.
VELOCYS now finds itself in a position with momentum seriously building behind our markets. Our customers are coming to us with projects that we're now getting involved in, and the momentum behind the offtake agreements that are now coming to these projects from airlines and fuel companies is really beginning to take shape.
We are ready to deliver. We are able to ramp up our production of reactors and catalysts that are the core products around our overall solution, which enables this conversion. And we are totally dedicated to servicing those clients. The demand for our technology going forward, I think, is going to be very big.
Good morning, and over to you, Henrik. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you everybody for joining us for our interim results first half 21. Thanks for sharing what is frankly the global premiere release of this short video. So we're very happy that you a chance to see that, and we will welcome feedback, of course, later in this session on that and questions. The big picture is indeed very exciting, and we VELOCYS we feel quite strongly that our moment is now. So I would like to take the opportunity to discuss that bigger picture, but also focus on the near term and the results that we have just announced a couple of weeks ago. So if you move forward here, let's see, page forward there. So I think the video summarized very much who we are and what we're doing. So I don't need to elaborate too much on that, but our clients are committed to net zero, and they need a fuel that has a negative carbon intensity in order to ever get to net zero. We're not talking about just reduction of carbon intensity of current fuels. We need to net remove carbon from the atmosphere, as you all are aware. So therefore 30, 40, 50, 60% reduction of the carbon intensity is not good enough. And that's one of the reasons why VELOCYS technology solution is so attractive in the current environment of much stronger urgency, where we need to get down to zero and not just reduce. So if we move forward here, who are we? Well, Andrew and I have been in charge of the company for almost 3 years now, and we are lucky to be supported by a very strong set of leading experts in their respective fields worldwide, in Ohio, in Houston, and in Oxford. Andrew and I come from a background inside hydrocarbon and renewable fuels, with experience from large corporates as well as business development for and commercialization of new technologies. So I think we're well positioned to take the company into this new exciting phase. The commercial growth drivers for VELOCYS right now are the 2 reference projects that we are doing in close collaboration with British Airways in the UK and with other partners in the US. This is a way for us to accelerate the technology adoption of the VELOCYS technology. We have identified that our reactors and catalysts are uniquely suited for this conversion process. And we are offering either the central processing unit, if you want to call it, or a full end-to-end solution to our clients, depending on who the clients are. We have clients who simply have the resources. They have a large surplus of, let's say, forestry residue from their forestry activity, very often triggered by the decline in paper and pulp demand. So the raw material that would otherwise go into paper and pulp can now be redirected into production of sustainable aviation fuel instead. So that's a strong need from those resource companies, or site owners, people who have access to sites or industrial production facilities where they are keen to integrate a decarbonization technology. So we can either offer the focused FT island or the full end-to-end solution, depending on who our clients are. Those clients are today typically based in Europe, US, or Asia, and we see a strong pipeline building up for clients with various access and resources to sites and feedstocks that need help to convert those sites and feedstocks to large volumes sustainable aviation fuel output. The intellectual property protection we are obsessed about. We spent as a company 20 years almost now. Actually, to the day, VELOCYS is celebrating 20-year anniversary from its founding in October this year. So we are fiercely protective of that through patent protection as well as protection of our trade secrets and know-how. Much of that is embedded in our manufacturing, so we are heavily involved in manufacturing. Of course, we're using outside parties for the, let's say, basic functions, but the sophisticated integration work of the reactor cores as well as the catalyst so recipe is something we're guarding very, very carefully ourselves. So at this point, I would like to hand over to Andrew Morris, our CFO, and to talk us through the interim results of 2021. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Henrik. So the interim 2021, we've got some great revenue generation and gross profit. So an important milestone for VELOCYS to recognise £8.2 million worth of revenue, resulting in £3.3 million of gross profit from the completion of our delivery of our reactors and catalysts to our clients in the US during 2020. This has led to a reduction in operating loss compared to previous years. And at the end of the June, we had £8 million just over £8 million in cash in the bank, compared to 13 at the end of December 2020. Another sort of thing to note about our results, I think, is coming from those out of this current period, is that we've got an additional grant from the UK government, from the Department for Transport, for £2.4 million going forward for the next 6 months. That'll secure the work for Alto project, and it'll cover the 100% of the costs for this waste to jet fuel project during that time, which is a great benefit to the business. Not part of the interim results, but part of the benefits in 2021 from running that project. So I think that in terms of the results is where we're at, that important milestone of getting that revenue on the boards, showing that we're producing and operating as a revenue generating and gross profit making business. Some highlights. I think we need to talk a little bit about our projects here. So the reference project that Henrik was talking about earlier on, the biofuels project in Mississippi, near Natchez in Mississippi, United States. We're concluding the final pre-feed work streams, one of which we appointed earlier on this year, Koch Project Solutions, part of the Koch Industries Group, which is a massive US privately owned organization, have now been appointed to provide the full lump sum turnkey EPC contract with a RAB. So we're going through the contracting process with them, and they're doing their due diligence and work with us. This is one of a major key in the door moment for any project like this, to get an EPC contractor into the project, and looking to provide the contract that ensures this project gets built on time, to budget, and will produce the fuels that it is set to produce. In addition to that, we're in advanced negotiations with multi-year fuel offtake partners for the sustainable aviation fuel and the environmental credits for this project, de-risking the revenues. It's a massive step forward for us, talking to large aviation organizations that will provide that offtake. It's multi-year and multi-million, turning into billions over the 8 years of the contract for those revenues. So I think this is a pretty unique situation. We're not just selling the fuel to these people, but they're actually underpinning the environmental credits that provide significant amounts of revenue to the project, and underpin the ability to get debt into the project, for which there will be significant amounts. We are also now setting off to start the initial discussions for financing this advanced final engineering of the project, which should conclude that those financing discussions during the first half of next year, and move into that feed that we're all talking about in that time, hopefully earlier in the year rather than later. Some other aspects that relate to the project: the US administration, the White House, announced policy incentives to accelerate SAF production, which is always very helpful for us in terms of financing the project, with $1.75 per gallon of federal producer credit, which is not much shy of the actual dollar per gallon you actually get for the fuel itself. So it's a huge benefit for us in the SAF market, and will be a great benefit to the project and to the production of SAF from subsequent projects in the southeast fibre basket of the United States, where we intend to have further projects similar to this, and that will be part of the future of VELOCYS in the United States. Next slide. So let's talk about the UK project. British Airways have continued and extended their options to work with us, and demonstrating their commitment to domestic UK SAF production, and to the commitment to the Untitled project. We've talked a little bit already about the £2.4 million of DFT grant to cover 100% of the cost of the project for the next 6 months, which is a great achievement for the project, and for the partnership between British Airways and VELOCYS. We're undergoing final geotechs on the site, and we're close engagement with the government on the appropriate policy support for the pricing of the credits that go with this. And the Jet Zero Council and the Renewable Transport Fuel Association are lobbying on behalf of the industry to get the right appropriate support that matches the similar kind of support that was given to the power industry, and particularly the offshore wind industry, when we went from ROCs to FITs and CFDs. So that's something that we're keenly supporting and working through the right channels. In terms of what's happening in Japan, you will have seen from some of our announcements that we've got an engineering agreement signed with Toyo to start development of their commercial scale project in Japan. It's a biomass to jet fuel project. The picture on the right you can see there, that is the demonstration plant that we finished work with into 2020 last year. We commissioned with them just before the lockdown for COVID in March, April last year. And then we're able to work with them on the internet to manage the operation, supporting their operational people as necessary. Finished that in November, December last year, and now we're moving on to the commercial scale project that they are doing, the NIDO 2 project, and that's moving into the feed engineering the last part of this year and into next year, and then we'll move into final studies that will start with construction the following year. We also announced, and Japan Airlines JAL did a flight using 3,000 litres of SAF from this project. Was used in a commercial flight from Tokyo to Sapporo. Some 25% of the fuel that was in the wing was actually SAF, which is an amazing amount of volume, and I think it's the first wood chips to jet fuel actually used in the wing of an aeroplane. So the first there with using product from our FT process. The other aspect of the relationship with Toyo is that they've also got other projects on the go, and one of them is they've selected us to supply a compact FT reactor for a demonstration project to convert CO2 and hydrogen into synthetic e-fuels via artificial photosynthesis and electrolysis. And this is another pathway to utilizing FT technology, our FT technology, for production of fuels from a different feedstock. So we've got waste, which we're doing in the UK, black bag waste, municipal solid waste, wood chips from the clippings, trimmings and thinnings of the forestry industry in the southeast United States. Similar product for the commercial scale biomass to jet fuel project with Toyo in the NIDO 2 project. And then secondly, thirdly, the third feedstock that we'll be using in this power to liquids, where we use power to produce hydrogen from the electrolysis of water and CO2 to carbon monoxide in this artificial photosynthesis, to then go produce carbon monoxide and hydrogen for the FT process to produce fuels. So those are the three feedstocks that are now being used and developed for utilization of the FT process. What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about our business model, our capital light business model. just explain that a little bit more to those that haven't come across VELOCYS before, and those that have, it's useful just as a revision. Our primary business line is the sale of the FT reactors and the catalysts that go in them, and licensing that technology to third parties. We provide engineering services related to those FT sales, which is terribly important part of the initial process of getting the inclusion of our FT reactors into other people's processes. So that's the primary business line. That's what we were initially set up to do. What we've developed since then, talked about earlier on, is the development of this integrated technology package, which covers the intake of the solid waste biomass, either trash or wood chips, through the conversion into synthetic fuels. So this is the end-to-end process that customers come to us and say, we want one of those, similar to the one you're doing either in the Southeast United States or at Immingham in the UK. And we can provide the ITP, the integrated technology package, to the customer in a much, much quicker process than they would take to do it from scratch. So that's our secondary business line. And then the enabling activity that gets our technology adopted and accelerates the technology adoption is the initiation of the development of these two reference projects in Mississippi and in Immingham. So what we've done is created the patented standardization of the process of converting solid waste feedstocks through to SAF. We use the reference projects as references to sell our technology, the FT reactors and catalysts, along with the integrated technology design of the end-to-end process. A little bit about the numbers. What does this mean to VELOCYS? Well, what you see on the right there is a box of numbers. In the vertical, you've got the years from 1 to 25, which is it's a typical revenue model for VELOCYS from a project. So in year 1, we get into the initial stages of design, and then move on to completing the design, coming to financial close, building the project, or they build the project. It goes live, i.e. gets to commercial operations, and then there's 20 years of operations. In the 3 boxes, you'll see the engineering is the top box. In the middle box is the product sales of reactors and catalysts. And in the bottom box is the technology license and royalties from decarbonisation royalties. The pro forma revenue profile provides about just under $60 million of NPV per client at a 10% discount rate for this type of scale of project, which will be about the same scale as the Immingham project. The biofuels project is half again bigger, so it's slightly different numbers from the biofuels project and bigger numbers. So we receive engineering design fees for the first 2 years and a proportion of the technology license fee up front. We then complete the engineering design in a period of some 18 months to 2 years. We get to financial close. At financial close, the final engineering fees are paid, and then the deposits are made for the construction of the reactors and the manufacture of the catalyst. We get those sales complete during a sort of a 24 to 28 month construction period. There's then a commissioning period in year 5, and the project will then go live. After it goes live, we then get this long-term recurring revenue streams over the life of the remaining life of the plant, which is the catalyst sales, which get replaced every 2 years. And we spread that over the period so you don't stop the project or the process completely. So that it's staggered, and we get those catalyst sales each year of $4.5 million. This is in dollars. And then we also get a decarbonisation royalty. We won't take any, when we sell these integrated technology packages, we don't take any additional charge on the project other than a decarbonisation royalty, which is a small, very small percentage of the top line revenues paid to us for provision of this integrated technology package and solution that allows the customer and the owner, fuel producer, to get to the starting line of production quicker than they would do otherwise. So our expectation is that over time, and for further customers, this timeline from initial feasibility to going live and commercial operation date will reduce significantly in time and therefore get them to earlier revenues and earlier profitability. I think I'm going to hand over to Henrik at this stage.
Thank you, Andrew. The question could be, why sustainable aviation fuel? The VELOCYS technology could technically be used to produce other grades of fuel relatively easily. For example, diesel fuel. We have chosen to concentrate on sustainable aviation fuel at this point for the foreseeable future. Why? Well, because it's the highest value add in the whole fuel sector. It's a part of the fuel demand which is expected to grow for a long time, while global demand for diesel and petrol and other types of fuels are expected to slowly or quickly decline over time as those sectors get electrified. Now, as Andrew already referred to, the chance or the opportunity of electrifying international or intercontinental air travel is close to zero. So therefore, the solution for aviation is indeed to find a low or negative carbon type of fuel and continue to operate with the excellent safety and performance track record that global aviation has today with the same infrastructure. It's a huge gain. So therefore, we are highly focused on SAF. As a byproduct, our technology, the FT liquids coming out of our reactors, when it gets upgraded, about 25% of it is naphtha, which gets blended into petrol. So it supports reduction of carbon intensity of petrol or gasoline as well. So that's important. So we do provide a fuel, low carbon fuel to the road sector as well. But the primary objective is to maximize the amount of sustainable aviation fuel produced, which we are able to do. So the important thing about this picture, which was even more powerful illustrated in the video, is of course not only the reduction of carbon intensity, but also air quality. Unfortunately, our clients do not get, there is no monetary award yet for producing sulfur-free, particulate, almost particulate-free, low nitrogen emissions fuels. But I believe soon there will be both in monetary incentives for that and also the requirements, the mandatory requirements on air quality for fuels will move in the direction of supporting synthetic fuels. Now, when the governments can see that this can be done at commercial scale, I think soon enough it's going to be required to have ultra clean fuels as opposed to the dirty type of fuel that you see on the right. And in particular, jet fuel globally is way behind in being regulated and mandated for cleaner specifications. We're all familiar with city diesel specifications of 10 ppm sulfur, for example. It's not so well known, but it is globally. Today, jet fuel is 0.2 sulfur, which is 200 times higher sulfur rate than city diesel. So that's important sort of future-proof, ready competitive advantage that VELOCYS technology provides. So the government's policy support we have alluded to already is strong. It's getting stronger. The incentives in the US until recently were highly favoring renewable diesel. In the US, there's a lot of electrification going on, but they are realistic about that the diesel engine is very efficient. It's 25% more efficient on a miles per gallon basis than a petrol engine. So there's been a huge push to stimulate low carbon diesel, which they've come a long way. Now the US have decided to accelerate and strengthen the incentives for low carbon aviation fuel and increase incentives for SAF to a level where our clients are even more incentivized to maximize SAF output rather than renewable diesel. So with the kind of incentives that are now on the table with an additional $1.75 a gallon, our clients would be incentivized to really produce as much SAF as possible, and then secondarily diesel and other products. In the UK, of course, in the US, the benchmark, the bar has been set very high. So the UK and Europe are now, in order to attract any investments in production of low carbon fuels like this, need to match that simply. Need to come up with policy incentives, mandates, and revenue stabilization, and to in the same level. So in the US, we can sort of summarize the different incentives, federal and state, to about $10 per gallon. So that is something we expect the UK and Europe to produce. European Commission came out on the 14th of July with very strong proposed legislation for mandates of replacing fossil jet fuel with SAF by 2% from 2025 and by 5% 2030 and up to 32% by 2040. That translates into very large volumes of SAF production required, mandated in very, like immediately, effectively in the scale of things, given that it takes 3 to 5 years to construct one of these plants. All right, so let's move to the reactor, the technology. I think you're all fairly familiar, and the video covers some of the competitive advantages of our technology, which we have alluded to before. It's ready, it's commercially ready now, it's compatible with the technologies upstream and downstream for the conversion, which is very important. A huge piece of the work we have done the last 2-3 years is to perfect the integration, the coupling of the technologies from feeding this lumpy feedstock into gasification, cleaning up the gas, and then feeding that into the FT reactors and final upgrading. Some investors ask, why has this not been done earlier? The FT technology, the FT reaction was invented very long time ago. Well, the FT reaction is a very sensitive reaction. Needs to be done at a very particular temperature, at a very particular pressure. And to do that, keep that pressure and temperature and the availability of the catalyst in a homogeneous way throughout an entire reactor, while rushing huge amount of hydrogen and carbon monoxide through it, is very complicated. It's very challenging. It's something that VELOCYS is uniquely positioned, and over a 20-year research development and commercial testing effort have now achieved. So it is, the more I know and learn about it, get more surprised that we've done it in such a relatively short period of time rather than long period, because this is very, very difficult. So that's the answer. Good news is that it's very difficult to copy. So the barriers of entry, together with our strong IP protection, make me confident that we can earn excess returns as an investment, VELOCYS, for a long period before this becomes if ever commoditized. So that's it for the presentation. Mark, do you want to summarize a little bit?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you indeed, Henrik, Andrew, for the update and the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those investor questions submitted already, I'd like to remind you the recording of the presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation is ended, you'll be redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. Henry, Andrew, perhaps before we go on to some of the questions submitted during the event, we did have a couple of pre-submitted questions. If I may just read the first one, which reads as follows: any prospect of expanding beyond the airline industry?
Thank you for that question. The answer is we could, but right now the highest value-added opportunity for our clients is in SAF, as I alluded to in the presentation. So we will be focused on delivering technologies for SAF producers primarily. Our competitive advantage and our clients' advantage is significant for SAF production. Not the least in order to achieve the very low freeze point required for SAF, -47 and below, is something very difficult to achieve for other production sort of conversion methods, such as vegetable oils being distilled and refined and upgraded into SAF can be done. But it's very challenging to meet that freeze point without losing a lot of yield. We don't have that problem with the FT liquids, or the clients are competitively well positioned or advantage position using FT liquids from FT synthesis rather than refined vegetable oils or used cooking oils. So we are commercially sort of advantaged for this particular application. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you, Henry. The next question actually sort of touched on some of that. It says, can you expand your competitive strength and the competitive strength of VELOCYS technology?
Thank you. We've touched on some of those already. It is the suitability of our technology for the deployment of the kind of scale that lends itself for using solid feedstocks and sustainable feedstocks. If it can also be biomethane, for example. Biomethane, wood chips, municipal solid waste are available in any particular location at a scale equivalent to 500,000 ton per year, which translates into about 100 million liters of fuel. That is very small for the petrochemical and refining sector. So it becomes small petrochemical project, but a large solid feedstock handling project. And in between that, sort of straddling that scale gap is the VELOCYS reactors are suitable for this particular scale. The petrochemical sector are not suitable for the scale determined by the bulky feedstock. Now, and then another advantage is, of course, it becomes distributed fuel production, a bit like distributed power production. So we, instead of the old technology involving crude oil, incentivizes massive refining centers in very small places of the world, which then causes huge transportation distances of the crude oil and the resulting products on both ends, and also a massive vulnerability, as you saw when these hurricanes hit the US Gulf Coast a number of times, and closes down a quarter of the entire refining capacity of the country, which is located in one small concentrated area. Same thing with Europe. We have a vast proportion of total refining capacity simply in Rotterdam and very few other places, and that is increasing. Instead, distributed fuel production is enabled by using sustainable feedstocks and the VELOCYS technology instead. So that strengthens the resilience of the whole system and improves distribution capability and shortens those distances, which I think has been highlighted in the UK recently, how important that is.
Thank you very much indeed. Henry, Andrew, we have had a number of questions submitted during the live presentation. If I may just hand back to you, just to click on that Q&A tab and just start at the top and work your way down and just read out the questions where appropriate to do so, please.
Andrew, do you want to go ahead with the...
Sure. I think we've had one or two interesting questions. Thank you very much. One is on, are Japanese airlines going to use your product in further flights? Once the project in the NIDO 2 project in Japan takes off, we expect that the Japanese airlines will be using the product coming out of that project. So that'll be a number of years away before they do that. But for VELOCYS, it's the engineering fees that we get from the initial stages that we're in now with them, and then the sales of reactors and catalysts that we do the year after next, that'll be good for VELOCYS and get the project going for us. But yeah, so the Japanese will be using product in further flights, but there isn't a lot of product at the moment coming from the demonstration project that was done last year. It was a fairly small project, and we used most of the SAF for that.
I have a question, I can see that, which is interesting. Yeah, it's Dominic R. You're asking why relatively classic, let's say at least so far, fossil investors and companies are now suddenly interested in sustainable energy and energy transition. Well, it's stunning. It's overwhelming how large engineering companies, large resource companies are now competing and falling over themselves to move away from their fossil history and into the new energy transition. It's very simple. It's follow the money. The pension funds, the large investors, CalPERS and Ontario Teachers, all those, even the Norwegian Oil Fund, everybody, you get disinvested, you get dumped if you don't transition and jump onto the transition bandwagon quickly enough. All the new money, the investment, the debt, government support comes into energy transition. So look at how quickly the coal industry just disappeared. I mean, look at the market cap of the coal industry 10 years ago versus the way it is today. Same thing could happen for fossil oil relatively quickly. So we are absolutely delighted that a company like Koch Industries are embracing new technology, which they have a long history of doing, actually. So I give large, competent players who are able and proven track record of executing safely large infrastructure projects in this sector to come to us and accelerate the energy transition into advanced synthetic sustainable fuels. So it is very positive. I think there is zero chance of them trying to do this as a way to obstruct development and protect their fossil sort of base. No chance. On the contrary, everybody with little bit of insight sees that this is the future, this is growth, this is where the money goes, and this is where customer demand is.
There's another question here. Are potential future clients also looking at processing similar feedstocks as we're doing? Yes, definitely. That's what the new business that we're talking about will have, either woody biomass or MSW projects. We are talking to customers on exactly that, and hence why we're producing our integrated technology package for that purpose, so that we can sell it into them, reduce their early stage assessment of technologies, as including ourselves, and so absolutely, yeah, potential future clients are looking at exactly this.
There's a question from Aaron about the incentives for sustainable fuels in the US. It is complicated. There is a federal scheme under the Renewable Fuel Standard awarding RIN credits, so-called D3, D7 RIN credits to fuel producers who are using advanced cellulosic feedstocks. Then the state incentive systems in California and a few other states further reward low carbon fuels, including negative carbon intensity fuels, with significant credits, as well as CCS credits for sequestering the byproduct of CO2 that is associated with the process under the so-called federal scheme of 45Q. And then in addition to that, we have the recently announced SAF of $1.75. All that adds up to, depending a little bit on configuration and carbon intensity, to at least $10 per gallon of incentives available in the US. And that can be compared with the fossil price of jet fuel or diesel, which is pretty similar, around $2 a gallon. So the value of the avoided carbon credits is in the order of $8 to $10, and then the value to our clients for selling the SAF fuel, if it is indexed to the fossil fuel, which could be, but most likely be sold at a very high premium. In addition, you end up with $12 a gallon or higher revenue. So it is it's highly advantaged, and therefore the playing field is quite level. Because if you distribute fossil fuels today in the US, you're an obligated party. You must buy a certain amount of these credits in order to redeem yourself from having distributed polluting toxic fuels. So we are there in the US, and I'm sure we will get there in the UK and across Europe in terms of incentives, which levels the playing field and allows sustainable fuels to compete with fossil fuels on a at least equal basis, if not advantaged.
I've got a question from Adam. Thank you for your question. And also, I think there's another one from James there about the sort of wider clean energy solutions away from the current projects. Yeah, I think one of the things I was talking about earlier on was the power to liquids project that the Japanese are taking up. That is where the third feedstock stream to VELOCYS that I was talking about very briefly comes in. So it's not just woody biomass and municipal solid waste. It is this power to liquids where we get involved in electrolyzing water and other means of picking carbon dioxide out of the air, and using various technologies. One can be reverse water gas shift, amongst other things, to produce carbon monoxide. Combine that with the hydrogen through the FT process to produce long chain hydrocarbons that get upgraded to fuels. It's a good question. So we've now got that third string to our bow in terms of the type of feedstocks that can be used with our technology in this sustainable fuels space. Enrico,
I see a good question from David M. in terms of our project development. As Andrew emphasized and in the video also, the reference project is something we are accelerating as a way to acquire adoption of our technology and also standardization of the process. I would describe Altalto as project development we do on behalf of British Airways. British Airways is founded, and the inception of that project was done by British Airways almost 10 years ago. And they've had a couple of false starts, but they asked us about 5 years ago to help them make this happen. So we have a sort of 50-50 stake in the development project to work, and we have got funding from other parties as well, as you might be aware, is now largely so by the UK government. So in a way, we could describe VELOCYS as doing this as a development service on behalf of other investors. On Bio, we are in the middle of engaging, as Andrew alluded to, larger investors to buy into that project and take it forward into the capital intensive stage of the project. Early stage of these kind of projects are very capital light because it's early stage engineering and project development, securing sites, etc. And then it becomes capital intensive. At the minute it becomes capital intensive, we hand over the project to large balance sheets, large investors, strategic or financial, and we provide the services of some further project development and engineering. So the development capital of Bio VELOCYS today owns 100%, and Altalto we own 50% with BA. So just describing that the beyond these two reference projects, VELOCYS will be focusing on servicing other project developers and asset owners who will be using our technology to accelerate their conversion of these resources into sustainable fuels. Okay, any other question, Andrew, that you want?
Yeah, so the new Green Investment Bank, the UKIB, UK Investment Bank based up in Leeds, can they help us and local authorities work in synergy to use household waste? Absolutely. I think they don't need to bring in the local authorities. We just need the UKIB to help us in providing loans to the projects and make sure that the projects get the debt into them that allows the equity then to come with it, and the projects then get through financial close and into construction. The UKIB is in the sort of early stages of its processing. We've been working with the Treasury and the Infrastructure Projects Authority, the predecessor to the UKIB, and we'll be working for that and with them as soon as they're in a position to do so, to get the project further along with its discussions with the debt provision. So absolutely, UKIB I think is a very key part of providing support for new infrastructure, particularly in the sustainable fuel sector, from waste in the UK, and will continue to be so very important.
Okay, David D put in a question of who our typical clients are. Well, I alluded to that in the video. It is all the producers of fuels today who there are independent oil refiners, for example, who would like to refine less crude oil and process other type of feedstocks to clean, sustainable fuels. So there are across Europe independent refiners, even in the UK. who have no upstream activity, for example, so no vested interest in upstream crude oil. So a number of those in the US, across Europe, as well as, but you don't have to be a refiner today to see the advantages of this technology. If you are a resource owner, such as large waste management company, or if you are large forestry company with surplus wood chips, which most of them have, then you are minded to invest in this technology to increase your value added of the waste products instead of burning them and turning them into heat and power of a very low value. So there's a broad range of clients that we are targeting and who are already engaged with us. Of which the traditional oil refining sector is only one. So that makes us very excited, because the scope and the scale of the kind of clients we are facing is very, very big.
Another question here about the adoption of SAF, and what will happen first, voluntary adoption or enforced. Well, most of the adoption so far has been mandated, and some of the things that Henrik was talking earlier on about, the mandate of fuels, both in the United States, with the mandate for the fuel producers, and the discussion about mandates. We've just had a SAF mandate consultation with the Department for Transport completing during September. The European Union put out a policy for mandating, as Henrik suggested earlier on, of some 2% starting on the 1st of January 2025, which is only 3 years away, moving up to 5% and 40% by 2040. So there's some very big mandates coming that will enforce the adoption of SAF at high volumes, very significant volumes. So the 2% for mandate for 2025 in the EU would require 16 of our plants in Immingham to produce that volume of feedstock, so of fuel. So it's coming, and the mandates will definitely push airlines to use it, fuel producers to produce it, and VELOCYS to supply technology.
That's a good question, and I would even strengthen that further to say there is also very strong corporate demand for fossil-free aviation travel. Large corporates in the US, including Amazon and others, British Airways recently publicly announced a large client in Germany demanded fossil-free air freight from Frankfurt to Atlanta of car components. The airline had to buy SAF in order to transport those, service those corporate clients. That happens every day. It's a massive pressure on the aviation the airlines to provide decarbonization of their freight services of goods and people. So I think there is almost as much pull as push for SAF, and including willingness for passengers to pay 10-20 euros per ton per ticket extra for a domestic, let's say, European flight, which covers the extra cost of SAF, which some of the airlines are offering already now in the small volumes that are available already now as a test, and it seems to be a strong uptake of that even. So it's there, and there's a willingness to pay, and that I think is the big difference from 2 years ago, when nobody could imagine that anybody would pay a penny above the, let's say, fossil price to travel or move goods fossil free. Today we see a massive willingness to do that, both voluntarily and mandated. So that's why I think VELOCYS is well positioned for this acceleration right now.
Andrew, Henrik, we've obviously had a number of questions come through. We're just coming up to the hour, and of course you can review all these questions that attendees have posted, and thank you very much for those, and thank you for answering so many that you have done. Henrik, perhaps before I redirect the attendees to give you some feedback, perhaps you could just give us a closing snapshot, and then we'll do so.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you everybody for joining us today. VELOCYS, we are very fortunate. We have a technology that our colleagues and predecessors have worked on for 20 years. We have benefited from support from the UK and the US governments. And we have a technology that is commercially scalable and deployable to produce fossil-free, sustainable fuel, allowing guilt-free, safe travel in between the continents and countries for millions of people. It is huge. It could not be achieved in any other way, frankly, and we need it to happen now. So VELOCYS is in a very fortunate position. I'm humbled and indebted to our predecessors and investors who had faith in the company for all these years during the development and research stage. And we are therefore in a very good position now to reward and pay back our investors from the cash flows generated by deploying our technology into commercial use going forward. So very excited about that future.
That's fantastic. Henrik, Andrew, thank you again for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close the session? You'll be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete and is greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of VELOCYS PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you and good morning.
Thanks very much.